I was hoping that from somewhere, somehow, Holly would turn up safe and well.
Why was he buying a mop and bucket and a bottle of bleach whilst his wife was still missing?
This must be the most impactful statement I've ever heard read in court.
Some people will walk away and find their next victim. Some will decide that they are going to resolve things through killing somebody.
Good evening, guys. How's it going? Feeling very festive in my jumper, which look even sings.
Holly was an outgoing character, had lots of friends around her.
Go into the kids' Christmas play in a bit, so I've already got a bit of makeup on. I'm just gonna give it a bit of a refresh, really.
The key thing that stood out for me was what a devoted mum she was. She was never too far away from her 3 children.
They're enjoying the snow, can you see? It is definitely very snowy.
She was a very beautiful inside and out person, just a breath of fresh air. She just loved life.
And show you my splurge. I've only got the one because the kids destroyed them, painted themselves in them.
On Sunday, 22nd of April, 2018, 4 months after she posted this message, Holly disappeared. 1 day later, she was reported missing to the police. Detective Superintendent Anthony Griffiths at Carmarthen Police Station in West Wales was asked to investigate.
Holly's sister was concerned because she hadn't heard from Holly since the day before, the Sunday morning at around 10 o'clock. She was very close to her mum, to her sisters, so there's no real reason as to why Holly would choose to be missing for this length of time.
Holly lived in mid-Wales, in the close-knit village of Knucklas, about 20 miles from Llandrindod, Wales.
This community is a lovely community. Everybody is so friendly. You cannot walk into a shop or down the street, whether you're local or not, and not have somebody speak to you.
Nobody had heard from Holly for over 24 hours, not even on social media, where she chatted to her family and friends. The silence was so out of character that Detective Superintendent Anthony Griffiths decided to act.
I made a very quick decision to head up to Llandrindod Wells to set up an incident room and then to start to form a team around me. Something about this report just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel like a missing person report.
Detective Superintendent Griffiths enlisted 2 family liaison officers, whose job was to provide the crucial link between Holly's family and the police. Detective Constables Katie Wilden and Alison Fletcher went to meet Holly's mum, Claire.
It was clear that Holly had a very special bond with her mum. It was the mother and daughter relationship, but they were also best friends. The 2 of them loved to go horse riding, you know, taking care of the horses, and it was a passion for them to share.
They would spend as much time at the stables as they could. It clearly was something that she had great pleasure in doing.
On the morning of Tuesday, 24th of April, 24 hours after she was reported missing, Detective Griffiths launched his investigation into Holly's disappearance.
I wanted to exploit things like house-to-house inquiries, just to see if neighbours could help us in any way. I wanted to exploit any opportunities around digital media, just again to see whether or not we could find trace that Holly was alive and that she was using her phone or using social media in some way.
By the time Detective Superintendent Griffiths arrived at Llandrindod Wells, his team were already making inquiries.
Oh, morning, Cam.
Morning, sir. How you going?
Yeah, very good. Morning, Gareth.
Morning, sir. Boss.
Key to his investigation was to speak with as many people as possible, including Holly's husband, Chris Carroll.
What's very important when you deal with a missing person report is where was she last seen and who was the last person that she was in contact with. And it's a term that we refer to sometimes as you clear the ground under your feet. So that would make Chris Carroll and the house in Knucklas obviously a focus of our concern right at the start of that missing person investigation.
What's going out over here?
Hold on,
See you right there.
no, I'm fine, thanks so much, sir.
A uniformed officer wearing a body camera was dispatched to meet with Chris Carroll.
I'll just bring on the sergeant. Once we tablets around, make sure, see if there's anything else or missing or anything like that.
Out the back door, there's 2 sheds.
Yeah.
He seemed pretty relaxed and quite confident with regards to what he was telling us.
Like pretty much every house round here that was
Yeah, alright.
and they didn't notice
I'll
us.
be, so I'll be knocking on the doors as well. So don't be offended if you see me doing that.
No,
please.
not at all, not at all.
Detective Inspector Gareth Grant oversaw the house-to-house inquiries.
We quickly established that the relationship between Holly and her husband Christopher was quite a volatile relationship, certainly in the weeks and days leading up to her going missing.
Hi, nothing like that. Don't know if you're aware that Holly next door's gone missing. Have you sort of seen or heard from her recently?
There's been a lot of arguing
Yeah.
in the night. It's regularly in the day normally, she's around.
When questioned, Chris Carroll made no attempt to hide the fact that he and Holly had had their share of problems and rows.
So Chris basically gave the story of Holly storming off, if you like, from the house after they'd had a disagreement on the Sunday morning.
Holly had left the house with personal belongings and had taken a bag of clothes with her and stated to Chris that he could have the house, he would be looking after the children, and that she had had enough.
Potentially lots of other things could have happened to Holly, because it's very unclear in those early stages as to the information that's available to you to give you an accurate sort of picture of events.
If on that very rare chance you will contact me, I'll be straight in contact with you, don't worry.
Yes, please, yeah.
Maybe there was a possibility at that point that she had walked out of the family home and left it all behind to go and find a new life. What made it almost impossible to believe that was the children and how close she was to them.
Hi, you got snow where you are? There's loads of snow here.
No matter how unhappy she was, I always felt that if she wanted to go, she would have taken the children with her.
By now, Holly had been gone for over 48 hours. Anthony and his team began to fear the worst.
We were starting to get a picture that Holly wasn't safe and well, and she hadn't voluntarily chosen to be missing, and that some serious harm had befallen her.
So yeah, that's your epic. So far we've had the foundation and the epic. I don't have the rose water. I really want it because it's brilliant for everything really. Like cleanses, tones, removes makeup. You can add it to your makeup brushes to make your eyeshadow more intense. You can use it to fix your makeup.
Holly had moved to Knucklas in early 2018 with her husband Chris and their 3 young children. To make extra money, Holly sold cosmetics online.
Obviously this stuff, it is buildable, so you can, if you need even more coverage, you can keep building on the coverage.
Holly was often changing her hair colour, her makeup style, and it was clear to see that she definitely had a talent and a passion for makeup.
Okay, so you can see that 5 dots on there. Not a lot. Let's see if we can sort this face out, shall we?
Oh, she had a look for every day, a look for every occasion. She'd have a purple day or a pink day or a going to the Oscars day. You know, she always made it fun. She was a good businesswoman. She knew how to run the business well, and it was her way, I think, of getting a career. Now she'd had her children, and the children were starting to grow up, and she could have a little bit of space to herself.
Holly disappeared on Sunday, 22nd of April. At Llandrindod Wells Police Station in mid-Wales, Detective Superintendent Anthony Griffiths had assembled a team of 25 officers to find her.
Right, that's that sorted with plan as well around the fast tracking for forensics.
Okay, that's good.
They focused on Holly's last known movements in the hours leading up to her disappearance. The door-to-door team had gathered interesting information about a domestic disturbance between Holly and her husband Chris that took place the day before her disappearance.
We certainly discovered that Christopher could get angry. On the Saturday afternoon, there was clearly an argument in the street between Christopher and Holly. That involved him trying to drive over her mobile phone. That argument sort of continued back into the house, and later that Saturday evening, neighbours will tell us that they heard quite a lot of shouting and screaming between both Christopher and Holly.
Holly's text messages would later reveal to the police a history of control by her husband, Chris Carroll.
There was controlling and coercive behaviour by Chris towards Holly. At some point that weekend, he'd broken her car keys to prevent her from using her car.
What coercive control is trying to achieve is to trap someone in a relationship. They can do that in a huge number of ways. They might be violent and frighten the person into staying. They may take away all their money. They may take away their confidence. They may sexually abuse someone. There's lots of ways that you can control someone. But if you think that the end game is a hostage situation, you know what coercive control is.
Holly had been trying to break from Chris for some time, but he'd always refused to leave. At one point, threatening to kill himself, which he said in front of the children. The door-to-door inquiries revealed that this time, Holly had finally managed to break free from her husband.
We were starting to have feedback that Holly had ended that relationship and that they had parted company in terms of their marriage. And Christopher would return to the family farm to live with his mum some 20 minutes away from Knucklas.
When questioned, Chris Carroll told police that on the morning of Holly's disappearance, he and Holly had argued. She'd walked out taking a bag with her. Witness reports appeared to back that up.
We had 3 separate reports of sightings of Holly on that Sunday afternoon. One was that she was walking the main road just outside of Knucklas, and a passerby had seen her and was adamant that it was her, and even pointed out the address that she lived at and said it was the lady that lives at that address with the 3 young children.
There was another reporter's suggestion that she'd been seen on a train on the Sunday afternoon. And that's where you've got to keep an open mind, really, because witnesses can sometimes get it wrong.
Could these sightings mean Holly was still alive and well, and that Detective Griffiths' instincts were wrong? The last phone message from Holly was sent to her sister at 9:55 a.m. on Sunday, the day she disappeared, saying, "I'll message in a bit." After that, there was stone-cold silence. But if her mobile phone was on and in range of a phone mast, Anthony's team could triangulate her signal and pinpoint where she was.
There had been no trace of Holly's phone after the message that she'd sent on the Sunday morning. There was also no trace of her on social media, which again was quite unusual because she was somebody that kept in touch with her friends and family via social media. At that moment in time, I was feeling the worst, but I was hoping that I was wrong. I was hoping that from somewhere, somehow, Holly would turn up safe and well.
Where was Holly Carroll? Had she simply left to start a new life? Or were Anthony's worst fears about to be proved right?
I knew the minute that Chris said that she'd gone and left her children that was not true, because she would never, ever have left her children.
1, 2, 3, and 4.
As well as the phone and social media checks, the police ran financial checks to see if Holly had used her bank cards after her disappearance. It was then that a breakthrough emerged.
The financial team came back to us and said the cards had been used at 2 separate supermarkets.
The bank cards had been used on Monday 23rd of April, the day after Holly's disappearance, at 2 supermarkets in town. Both supermarkets had in-store CCTV, so police could see exactly who had used them.
At that point, I was hoping it would be Holly. It would confirm that she was still alive at that time and that she had just walked away from the family home.
Could this be the first sighting of Holly since she disappeared?
It wasn't Holly, it was Chris. But more importantly than that, what we found was that Chris was buying certain items on the Monday afternoon, which then became concerning for us. We bought some bleach and some refuse sacks. Later on the same afternoon, he'd gone to a different retail premises. He'd bought a mop and bucket.
He was obviously making efforts to clean up something somewhere, and that just raised our suspicions even more as to what exactly had gone on that Sunday morning.
Anthony decided it was time to turn to the media for help.
Police are continuing to search for Holly Carroll, who was last seen on Sunday. Well, Caris Knockley is in our newsroom. Caris, what more do we know?
Thanks, Lucy. Well, 28-year-old Holly Carroll was last seen at her home in Knighton on Sunday, the 22nd of April, at around 10 a.m. No one has heard from her since. Now, Dyfed-Powys police have been searching for Holly and they've set up an incident.
A member of the public who was working at a local school came to us, and she reported that she'd seen Chris Carroll the day before on the Monday afternoon, and that he'd visited the school grounds where a clothing bank was kept.
The witness told police Chris Carroll had put several bags of clothes into the clothing bank.
So the fact that he was depositing clothing into a clothing bank suggested the possibility that he may be actually getting rid of some of Holly's clothes to make it look as if she had taken those with her. It's important that we get that nailed today, really. Yeah. All of the lines of inquiry we were carrying out were, if you like, ringing alarm bells. The fact that the phone hadn't been used, she hadn't been on social media, Chris Carroll being cited by the clothing bin, putting clothes in there. We had the sighting of him on the Monday afternoon, buying cleaning products. All of those factors taken together took me to a point where I'd reached that tipping point, where I'd made a decision that this was no longer a missing person investigation, this was in fact a murder investigation.
Chris Carroll's story just wasn't adding up. 2 days after Holly's disappearance, police asked him to come to the station to make another statement. When he arrived, he was in for a nasty surprise.
Mr. Carroll. Oh yeah, Mr. Carroll, I'm DC 1077 Market. I'm arresting you for the murder of Holly Carroll. You don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention one question, something which you may rely in court.
Certainly his response when we first arrested him for murder was that he didn't understand it, and very much protesting his innocence.
Everything will be explained to you. Do you understand the arrest? I understand the arrest, but yeah, but that's about it. I don't understand why or what or... Okay.
But I believed at that moment in time, Holly was dead, she'd been murdered, and Chris Carroll was responsible for it.
Chris Carroll was taken into custody to be interviewed by specialist officers in the presence of a solicitor.
My first question to you then is, tell us where Holly is.
If I knew that, do you think I'd be sat here?
Okay. Are you responsible for the murder of Holly?
No.
Okay.
You start off with trying to give the suspect an opportunity to openly give their account.
Let's talk about Sunday, 22nd of April.
Yeah.
In the early stages, you ask a lot of open questions, trying to elicit as much detail as you can from them.
Holly went upstairs, got dressed, came downstairs wearing the pink, almost like tie-dye jeans. And basically I was told, you can have the kids and the house. I can't do this anymore. She was out the front door, but...
So he very much painted a picture of him looking after the children, because he's very much been left with them by Holly, who's just decided to go off somewhere else.
I'm going to move on to the second statement. It's from Holly's mum.
Yep.
I have the understanding from what Holly has told me that a couple of years ago Chris had several affairs.
Yeah, there was one. I was unfaithful once, and the rest of it was sort of flirting messages and whatnot with people who weren't Holly.
Okay. So that's...
While infidelity was not a crime, other offences came to light that were.
Chris Carroll did have previous criminal history with regards to sexual offences committed against a young female. He also had theft and fraud offences.
But it was one other previous offence which grabbed the attention of Detective Griffiths.
There was a previous report of a domestic incident, a domestic abuse incident involving a past partner.
I always used to say to her that I'd never raise my hand to her. I never would raise my hand to her. She always used to turn around to me and say, yes, but there's always the first time, there's always a chance.
If you've got a person within a relationship and possibly they've used or threatened serious violence, they've displayed controlling or coercive behaviour, a reluctance to accept a relationship being over, all of those things should be seen as increased risk factors and an increased risk to serious violence being used.
The police put to Chris Carroll claims from witnesses that he had been abusive to Holly in the past.
She says that Holly tried to end a relationship with Chris about a year ago.
Yep.
And she also tried it again more recently. She says, though, when this happens, he refuses to leave the house.
Yeah, pretty much true. But I did go in the end. I went to my mum's.
The most dangerous point for a woman who's being coercively controlled is at the point that relationship is breaking up. And the reason for that is the person controlling them has just lost all of their control. Where there is a history of coercive control, where there has been some level of violence, maybe not serious, and where there is then a separation, the risk of homicide rises by about 900%.
With Chris Carroll now under arrest, the forensics team were able to enter Holly's house.
We didn't really know what we were looking for because at that point we didn't know what had happened to Holly. If something had happened at the house, we needed to ensure we had gathered all the possible evidence that we could that would tell us later on exactly what, if anything, had happened at the house.
Right, thanks for watching, guys. Please like, share, comment, and remember, if you're watching it replay, #replay. Thank you very much for watching, guys.
Police are continuing to investigate the disappearance of a woman from Powys. Holly Carroll was last seen at her home in Knighton at the weekend. A 35-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder.
I was convinced at that moment in time that Holly had been murdered. What I didn't know and what I wasn't sure of is where had it actually happened, at what point had it happened, and exactly how it had happened.
By now, Detective Griffiths had increased his team from 25 to over 60 officers in a bid to find Holly. The forensics team had searched Holly's house and had found the first clues as to what had happened to her.
We found a hammer within a bin in the kitchen. We obviously couldn't say for any certainty whether or not that hammer had actually been used to assault Holly. But we felt it was obviously significant that a hammer had been discarded into a bin.
We found her purse, driving licence, bank cards, belongings of Holly that Christopher had stated she had taken with her when she had left the family home on the Sunday.
The hammer was sent to the lab for analysis. Meanwhile, the forensic biologist scoured each room for traces of blood, with surprising results.
He couldn't find any trace of any blood within Holly's home. And that really was a little bit of a setback insofar as that we felt that if Holly had been assaulted with a hammer, then there was every likelihood that there would have been blood at the scene of that assault. Which then sort of starts to make you think, well, has the murder actually happened within the house or not? But I was still sure that we were on the right track with regards to Holly has been murdered and Chris was responsible for it.
Had Detective Griffiths got it wrong? Was Chris Carroll innocent of the murder he'd been arrested for? The custody clock was ticking. To prove Chris Carroll was guilty, they needed to find Holly. The only way to do this was to track his movements on Sunday, 22nd of April, minute by minute.
If he's entered Holly's house and his phone was previously connected to the Wi-Fi router, we're able to identify when that was. We're also able to do the same thing at his mum's farm.
Automatic number plate recognition cameras would reveal where Chris had driven in his car. Police also knew he worked in a quarry, an easy place to hide a body.
Which clearly would have made things very difficult for us. He's a plant operator, so therefore had access to machinery.
So between all of those bits of information, you're starting to build up a picture of information with regards to where you believe Chris Carroll has been during that relevant time that you're looking at.
He hadn't actually gone that far. He had travelled from the home address in Knucklas back to the farm. He had travelled to various supermarkets, and that was about it.
The evidence they gathered revealed no unusual patterns in Chris Carroll's behaviour.
Fortunately for us, as we're trying to work through that, we get a lucky break, if you like.
On the Wednesday morning, 3 days after Holly went missing, Anthony's media appeal paid off.
It was the most significant piece of information that we received throughout the investigation.
A member of the public contacted us to report that she had seen Chris in quite an isolated location.
I could see a person striding up the boundary side of the meadow. He was doing big strides. He was looking down and looking purposeful.
They knew this was the crucial breakthrough they'd been looking for, especially when they discovered who owned the land.
It was a field that belonged to Christopher's family, so he had rights and access to it. And there was no house within hundreds and hundreds of yards.
I said, "What are you up to?" As I glanced towards the fence. He said something like the dog had died, or he had buried the dog. He was quite nice, didn't seem agitated.
Now that was a significant piece of information to us because straight away that suggested to us, is this where he's hidden Holly's body? Immediately I decided to deploy a police search team down into that vicinity, so looking to see if there's some indication that Holly may have been hidden somewhere in that area.
So the first thing they found was track marks. So it was obvious that some form of machinery had been on that land in the days previous. And a decision was made then to very carefully search that area and to start to dig.
For the next 2 hours, police meticulously removed the soil.
The excavation was a very careful process because you want to make sure that you don't disturb any forensic opportunities that you would have. So it is by hand, it is slow, it is painstaking, and after a matter of a couple of hours, the search team then began to uncover like a black plastic sheeting. It wasn't a package that was an outline of a body. It was more of a bundle. But it was a bundle within which you knew a body could be contained.
And within that package, it was discovered that they could see what they believed to be a knee of a human being. We
then took the whole package as it was down to the mortuary, which is in Cardiff, for the pathologist to carry out an examination to start to determine exactly what we did have.
The police had to wait till the following morning to get the Home Office pathologist's official report. But Detective Anthony Griffiths decided not to keep Holly's mum waiting any longer for news.
He explained to Holly's mum that a body had been found buried on some farmland that belonged to Christopher Carroll's family, and we believed that the body was that of Holly.
Holly's mum was always very willing to sit and listen to what we had to tell her. Clearly devastated as you would be.
The pathologist's report would confirm what Anthony already knew, but also something he didn't: how Holly died.
The pathologist with our forensic team started to unwrap this plastic sheeting, which revealed some duvet covers, children's duvet covers.
Within and underneath the Thomas the Tank bedding, we discovered the body of Holly that had been further wrapped with, or bound together into the fetal position with ratchet straps.
The pathologist was then able to identify to us that she had received a severe blow to the back of her head, a blow to the head by a hammer, the hammer that we'd located in the bin in the kitchen. But also that there was injuries around the throat and the neck, consistent with strangulation.
It was relief that we have located the body, but that's met with a lot of sadness that such a young mother of 3 children had come to such a violent death.
A range of emotions, really, in terms of sadness that this is Holly and she's been murdered and here she is. And also the fact that we found Holly, now we can hold him to account to exactly what he has done.
It was a devastating shock for everybody. The town was in mourning for months. It was all little coffee mornings and little kids playing together and mums in the park, just talking and remembering the nice times they'd spent with her and the children.
Dyfed-Powys Police has confirmed that the body found yesterday was that of Holly Carroll. She'd been missing since last weekend. A 35-year-old man remains in custody on suspicion of murder. Holly's family has paid tribute to her, saying she lit up every room she was in and there was never a dull moment when Holly was around. They say she'll be missed terribly.
Police started to ramp up the pressure on Chris Carroll, showing him pictures of Holly's body in the hope he'd confess.
The last photo I'm going to show you is photo 18, a photograph of the scene from a distance away, showing you how her body was found after that was died. You can clearly see the Thomas the Tank Engine design. No comment. Does your little boy like Thomas the Tank Engine? No comment.
We chose to do this deliberately to take him step by step through the reality of what he actually did and the fact that he wrapped Holly's body in the children's bedding, in the Thomas the Tank Engine bedding.
Did the kids witness what you did to Holly? No comment. Were they in the house? No comment.
He didn't like the fact that there was a connection between what he'd done and the children, and it was a conscious decision to actually show in those photographs because we knew that that was putting pressure on him and encouraging him to start telling us the truth.
Is that your son's duvet cover? No comment.
He knows he can't lie to get himself out of it, so he's made a decision at this moment in time. It's better to say nothing at all, so I'm going to go no comment, because if I carry on talking to them, it's going to be obvious that I'm carrying on lying, so I'm just not going to say any comment whatsoever. So this is the tactic he's now switched to.
Police left Chris Carroll to think about the photographs they'd shown him. The following morning, 6 days after Holly's disappearance, Chris Carroll revealed the truth.
I was led to believe that you may wish to speak to me about something.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say?
All right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna... Whatever happened yesterday with the no comments,
Yeah.
I'm holding my hands up now. I'm admitting that I murdered Holly Carroll.
I think the whole team at that point felt a sense of relief. But I remember being in the incident room in Llandrundod Wells and saying, look, let's see exactly what he says, because this may not be the end of it.
Thank you very much for honesty, Chris. Let's start from the beginning then, shall we?
Yeah.
He told us in great detail that he had gone to the house. They had argued.
She was stood in front of me making tea, and I was stood by the side. The hammer was there.
He had seen a hammer on the kitchen side, and while she was making the tea, he had struck her over the head. She had gone to the ground, and then that he had got on top of her and strangled her.
I can't tell you if I hit her with the hammer again. I can't remember. A lot of it is blank.
Certain elements of what he was telling us were true, but not everything.
The critical evidence exposing Chris Carroll's lie, that the hammer was already in the kitchen, came from Holly herself. Shortly before she was killed on Sunday morning, Holly had been messaging her sister. Her penultimate message read, "He just been in shed and got a hammer." Holly's sister replied, "Ring the police now."
Holly simply messaged back to her sister, "I'll message in a bit." And that was the last contact that her sister had had from Holly.
I believe, in my opinion, that he had an intention that morning to kill Holly, and that within minutes of getting there, he went to the shed to get the hammer and came back into the house with the intention of killing her, which is exactly what he did.
Where were the kids at this time?
Outside playing. Okay, so can we not bring the kids into this?
I'll try my best.
Because it's nothing to do with them. They were there, they didn't see it, they didn't witness anything.
Yeah, I just need to know where they were.
They were out, they're not that sick. They weren't in there looking when I was doing it.
Yeah.
So after he'd wrapped Holly up in the bedding, he stopped to have a cup of tea. He actually drank the cup of tea that Holly'd been drinking before he'd killed her.
Put your hands around her throat, she's face up.
Chris put Holly's body in the boot of his car.
He then made the lunch for the children, and some hours later placed the children in his car along with the body of his wife and drove to the farm of his mum, where he was at that time living.
When he got to the farm, he took Holly's body out from the boot of the car. He wrapped her in some of the black plastic silage wrapping that was at the farm. He put her into the scoop of the tractor, and then he drove the tractor from the farm with Holly in the bucket about a mile or so and down into a field which was part of their farm. He then proceeded to dig a shallow grave. He put Holly's body into that grave.
He then left the farm and returned home with the children and spent the Sunday night at home with the children.
On Friday, 27th of April, 5 days after Holly died, Chris Carroll was charged with her murder and went to await trial.
A coercive control victim can be absolutely anybody. There was nothing about Holly that made her more in danger of being killed than any of the rest of us. The problem wasn't Holly. The problem was Chris Carroll.
Once all forensic tests were complete, Holly could finally be laid to rest.
The day of Holly's funeral, it was clear to see by how many people there what a loved person she was and, you know, how many lives she touched.
The family had asked for everyone to wear bright colours, so there was a mass of colour. I think it felt important for us to be there on that day because we knew how important it was to Holly's mum.
I know that some people travelled from abroad to come to the funeral as well, so it was a real privilege to be part of that day.
The police had no record of coercive control by Chris Carroll throughout his relationship with Holly. However, pioneering new research by Dr. Jane Monckton-Smith shows it is possible to predict whether a partner is likely to commit murder.
We really do need to change the way we think about these domestic homicides. First of all, we tend to think about them as crimes of passion. They're not crimes of passion. They're not spontaneous. This is about control.
Dr. Monckton-Smith has shown that in nearly every instance of domestic violence, there are 8 stages before the murder takes place.
The first stage is about the perpetrator. So have they got a history of being controlling? Have they got a history of stalking? In the second stage, they will want to get a commitment very quickly. They will want this relationship to be solidified very quickly. And that moves us then into the third stage, which is the relationship. And that will usually be dominated by coercive control, sometimes violence, sometimes not. The fourth stage comes in when there is a threat to that relationship. The controlling person is having their control taken away from them. Which leads us then on to stage 5, which is where they know they're losing control, so they try and get that control back. They may cry, they may beg, they may make threats, they may threaten to kill themselves, but all of this is designed to try and get the control back. The 6th stage is quite difficult, and this is where risk really starts to rise, because it is in the 6th stage they decide how they're going to resolve these control issues. Some people will walk away and find their next victim. Some will decide that they are going to resolve things through killing. The stage after 6 is 7, and this is where they start planning what they are going to do. And stage 8 is the homicide.
If we can recognize these 8 stages, we could prevent another woman being murdered.
Chris Carroll went through every stage. Now, he was a controlling person, he was possessive, he was jealous. When he thought he was losing control, he threatened to kill himself. So we see with him what I would call almost a classic case. No one should accept coercive control or domestic abuse. And if anybody thinks they want to get out of a relationship, there's lots of help out there now. You can go to the police, you can go to your local women's service, you can phone the domestic violence helpline, you can phone the stalking helpline. I would say, do something, don't do nothing.
A 35-year-old man from Powys has admitted murdering his wife. 28-year-old mother of 3, Holly Carroll, was found dead in April, 4 days after going missing. A judge told Christopher Carroll he can expect to be jailed for life when he's sentenced next week.
In the months leading up to the trial, Chris Carroll maintained a plea of manslaughter, claiming he had lost control momentarily, that it was a spontaneous act. But on the day of the trial itself, he unexpectedly changed his plea to murder. At the sentencing, the judge gave Chris Carroll the minimum sentence possible, 15 years.
You could see on Chris Carroll's face his reaction, the fact that he was pleased that the judge was starting at that point. And that smile was an indication of, yeah, do you know what, I'm getting away with this.
But the judge hadn't finished. On top of the 15-year minimum sentence, he added 2 years for each of 5 aggravating factors, bringing the total sentence to 25 years.
I must say at that point we were satisfied with the length of sentence that Chris was given.
Chris Carroll's reaction really was, it changed then to showing no real emotion at all, nothing whatsoever, which I think is a sign really of how detached and emotionless he was with regards to what he'd done.
In court, Holly's mum read out a victim personal statement, the chance to tell Chris Carroll the impact his actions had had.
Because of you, I could not look at my beautiful daughter's face one last time. All I could do to say goodbye was hold and kiss her hand in the morgue of a hospital while she lay otherwise completely covered under a blanket. You did that. Because of you, I had to tell 3 frightened and confused children that their mummy was dead. I had to look into the eyes of my granddaughter and tell her that Daddy was in prison because he had hurt Mummy so badly that she had died. She will no longer look at me and has not hugged me properly since that day. I have to live with that. Because of you, there are nights where I wake up crying, and there are nights when I just don't sleep. I cannot decide whether it is better to dream about Holly or not. On the one hand, at least I get to see her and be with her again. But on the other hand, it just cuts a little deeper into a wound that will never heal. You changed my life on a fundamental level. You took my soulmate away from me and you carved out my heart. You changed the axis on which my world turned. I will never accept what you have done. I will never get over this or be okay with it. But there is one thing you did not do. You did not ruin my life. I do not give you that power.
When Holly's mum was reading out the victim personal statement, she read it very confidently, and at certain points she actually looked directly at Christopher Carroll.
This must be the most impactful statement I've ever heard read in court. The members in the court were crying, yet Christopher Carroll sat there totally emotionless.
Chris Carroll deserves everything that he got.
I don't want to think about Chris Carroll. I don't want to hear his name. I don't want to know anything about him.
Holly was another woman that had her life taken away from her in a domestic setting. It's not acceptable in terms of the level of violence by men against women, and more needs to be done in order to address the level of domestic abuse.
The community, I don't think, will ever forget her because of the sunshine that just came from her, and she brought a lighter time to all of us. No, she'll never be forgotten.
See you later. Bye.